Bibles, your phones, whatever you want to use. Exodus chapter 20, starting at verse 1, reading down to verse 5. It says this, "And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me." And so, the main portion of this passage, there's talking about idols. And, I don't think any of us struggle with idols in the exact way that it's talking about here. I don't think anybody has a shrine or a statue in your house that you go and bow down to and pray to. It's not a thing in Western culture that we normally do. But Western culture still very much struggles with idols. We struggle with idols, whether it's money or people or our passions or a whole host of things. Pretty much anything can become an idol, to the point now that basically people's identities have become their idols, right? That this is who I am, and everything is in service to that identity. And so we may not, come to a church-like building or have one in our house where we bow down and worship something, but we have things that can very easily become gods before the God if we are not careful. And we have to be careful because the reality of the matter is, unless you are in a very special case and you are also extremely spiritual, the number one thing of our time in our life is almost never God, right? It never is. And it not saying it was here. They had to work, they had family time, they had all those types of things that they take up more time than God. And when we have those things, we're more likely to plan around them. And so that can very easily become where God becomes relegated to something that when I have time, when I feel like it, and other things begin to take priority. Even if we don't set out that way, but that can become the reality. It can, unfortunately, even a job can become an idol. If I speak for men in Western culture, it's probably money, sports, or women are probably the things that take place. But, and there's so many subcategories under those. But if we're not careful, that will be something that we begin to plan our lives around more than we plan with God, because it's something we desire. It's something that we put before it. And because we don't see ourselves bowing down to it, we don't see ourselves worshiping it in the sense that we want to consider worship, we don't consider it an idol. But it has taken that place in our life. And I forget who said this, but they said this. He said, "We don't decide whether or not we worship. We decide who or what we worship." We were made to worship. And whether we worship God, whether we praise God, whether we give that to God or not, we will worship something or someone. That is the reality. We can try and convince ourselves that we don't, but we will, because we will give something our time, our talent, our treasure, and we will put ourselves into that and let it become the main thing on our life. And we have to be also careful, because it's true of God, but it's also true of idols. I don't know if anybody have heard the name, but Adrian Rogers was a a well-known preacher, probably in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, charismatic, mainstream Christianity. But he said this, he said, caution, the man molds the idol, then the idol molds the man. Right? And if slowly it becomes my idol and I choose what it is, what I'm passionate about, but as it becomes the focus, it begins to fold and make how I act and mold me into how I do things. And it's not the exact same with God, because we don't mold God, but if we worship God, it molds and changes us, right? You preached about it some on Sunday, right? And how our praise and our worship, right? And so that changes us and molds us. But if I worship sports or athletics, that will mold and shape my life more and more and more and more, right? If, I guess a destructive one that's become very popular, especially, I guess, in sports circles and male circles, is sports betting recently. And if you follow sports at all, you will see the amount of advertisement for sports betting has absolutely skyrocketed to the point it is comical, the things that you can bet on in a sports game for certain ones, like the random things. But betting and gambling on something has become such a prevalent thing, and it's obviously all the destructive things that come with it, but it has molded people so much in how they view things, how they watch things, how they consume it, where they can't even just consume sports for the enjoyment of watching the sport anymore, but it's like, I got to have something more on it. I got to, yeah, and you're lucky if it's $5 and not 500 or 5,000 or whatever it is, right? But it's begun to mold and change the habits where even people that, 10 years ago wouldn't have had a problem with sports betting or gambling are now like, can we watch a sporting event without hearing about it? You can't. And part of the reason they have so much something in your life is always going to be fighting God for that place. And it may change from year to year, period of your life to period of your life, but there is always something, that position of preeminence, right? If you work, you're always going to spend more time working. You're always going to spend more time sleeping, hopefully, unless you're all praying 9 hours, 8 hours a day. I hope you're spending more time sleeping. But there's other things that you will inevitably spend more time doing. But I can choose to make sure God is still at the preeminent position in my life. That it is, I do my best to build my life around Him, His schedule, His plan, not around anything else. Yes, work schedules, things are reality. Like, I'm not trying to say, just tell your boss to, when they need something, but God needs to be a priority. And the Bible, not just once, not twice, but often reminds people, 1 John 5:21, little children, keep yourselves from idols. 1 Corinthians 10:14, wherefore my dearly beloved. So these are, especially Corinthians here and the next one, they're church epistles. They're written to people in church. But wherefore my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Colossians 3:2, set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth. Right? Written to people in church. Meaning that it is something that we are not above. And is not something that we can say, you know what, God, you saved me, and at that point you are number one, and you're always going to be number one. No. It's a choice. And I think I mentioned it last week when I was talking about Noah and other things, but I wish so many of these decisions that we had to make as Christians could be one-time decisions. It would make, as, ministers, our jobs a whole lot easier. It would make all that type of thing, but it's not. Every day I have to choose, God, you're one. Every year, God, you're going to be number one, right? I'm going to be that living sacrifice. I'm going to put you first. I'm going to surrender my life to you, right? But because we're alive and we continue to have free will, I can wake up tomorrow and say, you know what? Something else is number one. And it may not even be the first time an active decision to choose something else, but I didn't actively choose God. Right? And it may be something else that, was important. But I always have to say, God, you've got to have a part of this day. There's going to be times, let's just say your prayer time is 6 a.m. But you know what? There's going to be some times you're going to be on a plane, you're going to be at the airport, and it may not, you can't just, you're in line at security, you can't, not a place you want to be making a scene or anything like that, right? But that doesn't mean that day, you know what, God, today was a break from the schedule, but there's going to be time for you today, right? It's good to have a consistent time, because that makes it easier, but there's going to be breaks in the schedule that I'm going to have to actively choose to say, God, there's time for you today. I remember he wasn't my pastor at this point, but he was the assistant pastor, and I remember him saying, I forget exactly what he said to God, but he's like, I'm going to read your word every day. And he was like, there are some days that I worked 12 hours and I came home and I read 5 or 10 verses. But he said, I would not go to sleep before I read those, because he's like, I did my best every day to read a lot more than that. But there were some days I got home and my eyes were closing very quickly and I was not going to. But I made that, God, I'm going to open your word today because you're a priority. You're the one that I'm looking to. And yes, there's going to be a reality some days where it may be 6 verses. It may be 3. And guess what? If that's the exception, he's not worried. If that's the norm, that we're just like, if we're lucky if we get 3, then God's like, okay, we can do better. But if you're doing your best every day, and some days it's, God, I talked to you for 5 minutes today. I barely had a chance to breathe. This went wrong. This situation happened in life. But before I laid my head down, God, I talked to you for 3 minutes and I may have fell asleep while I was doing it. That shows that I value it this much, that I made sure that I did. Right? God, I wanted more, and life didn't let me today, and not because I chose other things, but that's what happened. But I'm going to show you that the 30 seconds that I had when I laid my head down before I couldn't even keep my eyes open, but God, I wanted to make sure that I talked to you as much as I could. And that shows that that's what's most important. Yes, we want to do our best to spend as much time as possible with God, right? The more we can spend in his word, the more we can spend in prayer, the more the better, right? We'd all agree that. But life is also reality sometimes. And don't always have time to do as much as we want of anything. And so that's why we have to choose what we value. And that's where we choose things that become idols, or we choose God. And I would say for too many people, I'm not speaking for anybody in here, but just looking around in churches all over the place. Too many other things are above God. Too many things. I mean, nothing should be above God, but he's not even second place for a lot of people, or third place. He's the garnish of life, if I could put it that way. That if I remember, if I have time to chop it up, to put it on the meal, to make it a little bit nicer, then God, you know what? Thank you. And he's not even, the second side that you're questioning whether you want to spend time making. He's like the garnish that you make every other week, if that. And we're not going to be successful and overcoming living for him if that's where he is in life. It will always be more of a struggle than it will need to be. Living for God, we all can say, at times is a struggle. It's a fight. It's a battle. And it is way harder when he's not where he needs to be. Right? Because then I'm in two camps. And God, there's a part of me that wants to live for him, but I'm not spending the time with him to get the help that I need. And so I'm divided. And the Bible is clear about what happens when a house is divided or life is divided. It doesn't stand. It isn't successful. And so 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour." And I would say, if I could say this, in Western culture, I'm not going to speak for anywhere else. I've never lived there. But it's not, some of the thing, with possession the way we would have seen in the Bible or things like that. He is trying to find and replace God with different things. And saying, you know what? Chase after fame. Chase after money. Chase after this. Put your life towards that, because that's your choice, and you will choose to worship that, and that will lead you away from God. And so we all have to be mindful and be vigilant to say, you know what, God, today, tomorrow, forever, what is, Joshua said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve God. And that means he's going to be number one. And he made that declaration once, but he had to make that choice every day. Every day. He made it publicly once that we read. And we make public declarations sometimes of consecration and what we're going to do, but they mean little compared to a personal choice every day. Right? A personal choice every day that God's your first will go so much farther than a public declaration every so often. And so in closing, as we have a little time of prayer, maybe we could even pray, what does, was it David that said, search me and try me, O God. Know my heart, know my thoughts. And God, if there's anything before you in my life, show me so that I can get rid of it if I have to get rid of it, or put it in its proper place. Right? Because some things that are going to come before God, you can't, you're not just be able to get rid of them, but you're going to have to make the choice to put them in their proper place. Some of them you're going to need to axe totally, but some of them you're just going to be, God, it's not a bad thing, but it's in the wrong place. Right? I guess a silly example of that, right? But before we pray is, like with dessert. Dessert is a wonderful thing in moderation at the right time. But if you're eating Dairy Queen for breakfast, you're going to, I don't know what other, a bakery for lunch and then something else for dinner. I like sweets, but even I'd be like, okay, we gotta, some things are out of balance here. maybe some fruit, something else we could throw in here, because those are what bring us sustenance that we need. And so let's spend a few moments and say, God, are you where you need to be? Are you number one? And if not, God, what do I need to do to put you back there? Because I want you there. And I think we all would say that. That's where we want God. But I'm going to make that choice again today and make that commitment that every day going forward, I'm going to do that. So, Brock, if you could play some music for us, if we could find a place to pray for the next 15 or so, 20 minutes before we go home, say, God, you're my priority. You're number one. And there's going to be no idols before you.